All right, we're going to be doing a upgrade on these brakes. This is a classic Santa Cruz Blur, early 2000s. It originally came with Juicy 7 brakes. They're Avid Juicy 7 brakes. Right now, the rear brake has no response. It's hitting the handlebar. It's not coming back to life, no matter how many times you pump it. And it's so old too that at this point, there's probably parts inside that are either frozen or gaskets are blown. It's not even worth that or rebuilding it. It's just easier to replace it with the new set. And we're going to upgrade to derailleur, Shimano derailleur brakes. Good price point, decent power, got the nice ergonomic lever going on. Front lever seems to be okay, but we're just going to do it as a set. You never know when that other side's going to go bad, since these are pretty old and original. So first thing, we're going to remove both wheels, get them out of the way, and I'm going to go ahead and relax that rear derailleur down to the smallest. The brakes worked, but very minimal, very minimal. I could still get it to drag. But we're getting that chain down, derailleur relaxed, that way this wheel's going to come down nice and easy. Now usually the skewers on this side, it's a flip, the 9mm style. They have it on the incorrect side, but we'll fix that, that's minor. One reason is it gets in the way, makes contact with that rear derailleur, that flip lever. So we're gonna just take this whole thing apart. Watch your springs. 2 sets of springs. If your lever's too close to your fork or frame, you might have to get a little tool to get in there and wedge it open. Try not to chip your paint. So we're gonna start with removal of the rear caliper. We got 2 mounting bolts right here. And typically you're going to be a 5mm hex, also called an Allen tool. And I like this 3-way tool because, whoa, that guy was loose. That was dangerous. This one's tight. That in no way has anything to do with the poor braking power. But we're going to have 1, 2, we got 2 washers. They're conical and concave, so they meet each other. And then we got a washer, and we're going to hang on to this bolt. So keep everything together if you can. Take off this other guy. And if it's a little tough unscrewing, it's probably because it has thread locker in there, which is good. And I just dropped the 2 right there. So those other 2 came from underneath the caliper. So we got 1, 2 on top with the thin washer, and then we have 2 more on the bottom of the caliper. So going between the caliper and the adapter there. So the next thing we want to do is take a look, follow our hydraulic line. So there was supposed to be a zip tie here, he's not there, and we're just following to see where it goes. So it's actually going between the frame and the shock here. Some of them we may have to disconnect our hydraulic line, but in this case, instead of making a mess, we can just disconnect our shock right here. 1 bolt, that guy moves down, and then we can free the caliper and the line, and then just follow it up. Another zip tie. Actually, it goes into a housing stop right there, and then that's about it. That's good, so we don't have to disconnect our hydraulic line for any reason on this frame. So for this one here, depending on what your setup is, we got 2 bolt heads, 4mm. One of them's going to unscrew. I don't know which one, so you're going to get 2 tools and just start breaking free, and one of them is going to start backing out. So the one on this side is starting to come out, which is good. And typically there's thread locker in there. That's a real short one. So I got 1 bolt, 1 washer, and then this guy is a shaft. He's probably, you know, a few inches long. See if he comes out on its own. If he doesn't come out, you might have to push from the other side. Just be careful when you push, you don't harm the threads inside here. So get something that's just bigger than the threads, but it'll still fit through there. So sometimes you have to tap it through with the mallet, but this guy was real easy to come out. So that was nice. And then we're gonna move this down, tilt like that. So nothing to do here with the shock as far as like letting air out or anything, since the rear end of the bike is already down. So there's no compression on this guy. That's the most important thing. And then basically it stays fully extended, and then we just drop it down and we just grab our line here. So here there's a zip tie connecting to our derailleur cable. So we want to cut that. Be careful not to cut any other housing, especially hydraulic. And then we just freed our hydraulic line. So in this case, the hydraulic line is also connected to the outside as well. So it was in no way connected going through our frame, which sometimes it does, but in case your bike did, we're gonna follow this procedure. But in this case here, it's actually sitting on the outside. So now you know both ways if that needed to be done. There's actually a housing insert right on the inside. So this probably could have went on the inside as well. So now we'll continue. We need to free this guy, the zip tie. So I like to use the wire cutters, or also known as dikes. So once you snip that, so now he's free. It's actually a nice option that they had the hydraulic line going on the outside, because if you ever needed to do a repair or replacement or something like that, we don't have to disconnect the shock or disconnect the hydraulic line from the caliper to run everything through. And then this one here, they actually have an adapter set up right here. So this adapter set up right here, it's a piece of plastic or metal, and then it's actually connected to the metal brazon of the frame, but they used a bolt to attach it, and then the arm actually comes out here to hold or harness. Probably did that because they wanted to go on the exterior, but it also has a housing for the hydraulic line to go through the middle, which would have forced you to run through the frame. But either way, this works. So it looks like it's a 2.5 or a 2 millimeter, and we'll be able to see better once we get this guy off. So if you run into these, so right now the housing is being cradled, so we can pop the housing out, hydraulic line out, and then it's an insert into the brazon of the bike. So back here there's actually an Allen tool. Looks like it's it's going to be a 2, I think it's a 2 millimeter or a 2.5. So if you wanted to take this whole system out, you'd unscrew it, it loosens it up, and then you can slide it right out, but we're going to leave that in place. So here with these Juicies, they actually have 2 bolts. It's a half clamp, so these 2 bolts will take the half clamp off, and then the lever will just slide off the bottom. So it is separate from your shifter. And these are going to be 4 millimeters. So this way you don't have to take your grip off, which is nice. And then this half clamp comes up just like that. And then take the rest of this guy, the lever off. It's just kind of stuck on there. We go. Boom. And now we're completely free. And same thing with our front brake caliper. And you're going to have the same, you may or may not have the same washer setup as the rear, but just be ready to catch whatever may fall. Yeah, from this point it does look like it's the same. So typically they're going to give you some new caliper bolts, but just hang on to this stuff. It's good to have, put in your junk drawer. And for this one we got 2 zip ties, 1 and 2, that we're going to clip off. Some of the newer forks may have 1 mounting bolt right here, probably a little 2 millimeter. And that's has a little plastic arm with a 2 millimeter bolt, so be careful when you take that off, just to release your line here. And notice that the line does go on the inside of the fork, not on the outside. In case you crash, you're not going to scratch anything up. As long as everything's nice and snug and take all the slack out, the hydraulic line should not hit the wheel. Boom, boom, and that is free. Now we just have to unclamp it, unclamp the lever. So I took a better look at the brazon, the opening in here that could potentially have a housing. It has its own stop, so that would be more for like a derailleur. So that's why they definitely had to go on the outside of the frame for the hydraulic. Hydraulic lines are typically fatter, about probably more of a 5 millimeter than a 4. So we definitely can't go through the frame, so I'm not even going to try. We're just going to put this guy back. Make sure that you have all your washers. Sometimes there's some special washers that sit on the side that fall out and this guy drops down, but I think this is all good. When you get your bolts back through here, go ahead and put just a very light drop of thread locker, not too much, don't overdo it. So this shaft goes through. You could probably put this shaft on either side, you still have the same result. If you do have issues getting this lined up, the rear end of the triangle, the bike may have to move up a little bit. Might have to do some light wiggling and jiggling, as well as some to the shock. So 2 people might be in order. but typically you can do this with one person. You might have to either twist side to side, left and right, or up and down with this shock. So you're also trying to manipulate the rear of the triangle too. The rear of the bike might have to gently vibrate up and down just until it allow you to find the alignment for that screw stud. And then most suspension bolts, this includes pivots, are not that tight. Probably looking anywhere from like 8 to 14 Newton meters. You just have to be, get it snug, and then just give it a little bit of an extra turn. That's what that thread locker is for. Keep these bolts from vibrating loose. But there's such a small bolt that if we overdo it, we could snap something, break a bolt, or strip threads. So in your new box of your hydraulic line, so we got a front and rear, and the lines typically come really long for the rear or the front, so then you can measure it to any bike, whether it's a small bike, large, or extra large. The frame gets longer, so then our hydraulic line needs to get longer. So in some cases, the line is so long, like say on a medium bike or a small, that you might have to cut your excess hydraulic line, which means you have to disconnect the system. So in that case, they should give you the extra hardware. Actually, Shimano gives you these 2 plastic blocks for holding or hugging the hydraulic line. They give you a bleed block, so when you have to bleed, you take your brake pads out and then you slide the block in so we don't accidentally actuate the pistons. And then we have even an olive and a barb on the inside, as well as 2 bolts and 2 plastic safety clips. Now these adapters right here, usually they're brand specific, so if you have an Avid braking system, you usually want to get an Avid adapter here, but there's times you can mix and match, but you're taking your chance when you do that as far as fit. But if it does fit, then it's going to work. It's not going to be a safety issue. It's just basically you need to get that caliper to sit inside here. The only time you need to change this is if you're going to go to a bigger rotor or a smaller rotor. So that rotor size kind of shrinks in size. That means the caliper needs to come down further. So like this frame right here, because we going with the side mount, it does need this adapter. So side mounting here, bolts are coming in from the side, and then once the caliper arrives, the bolts are coming in from the top. So that's the only way the majority of these calipers will fit. So definitely need this. It's like a side post type of an adapter is needed for that guy. So if you're going to a larger rotor, then all what's happening is this is just going to get taller here, so that caliper will sit higher to make room for that larger rotor. Otherwise you'll never get the caliper on. It'll just sit up here and it'll never make contact with your base right there. So now we're ready to mount the new rear brake. So it comes all coiled up like this. Make sure you do have the correct one. Make sure it's long enough. You didn't grab the front. So it should be almost, the length of the bike. And this one definitely, yeah. If it's about your wingspan, we have the correct one for the rear. So they give you a little plastic clip right here. It's just a safety in case we do hit that brake lever on accident. We'll hit that plastic clip right there. That's in place of the rotor. When you do take this out, you can always save these. So if you're taking your wheel out, putting it in the car or whatever, you can pop this in so you don't accidentally hit your brake lever. If you do hit your brake lever, not the end of the world. The pads will start to come out. If you hit it a few times, more than a few times, it'll come out, and then they'll want to stay out, and then you won't be able to fit your rotor in between these 2 pads. So we just have to get a wedge in there. If you can get something plastic, a sharper wedge, and just to gradually go in there. So they sell these. Park Tool has a tool. Some of the bleed kits will come and with a wedge or a pad spreader. So we're going to go ahead and start by mounting this rear caliper. Again, there's no reason to disconnect our hydraulic line. We're not running it through parts of the frame. It's not an internally routed going through the frame. So we just need to have the right direction. When in doubt, always look for that big logo. They always want that logo showing. In this case, it's derailleur on this side, and we're on the left side of the bike so you can read it.